I came home from Abu Dhabi after 12 long, heartbreaking years away, carrying nothing but one worn-out suitcase and a heart that had been counting down the seconds to this moment for over a decade. Every blistering day under the desert sun, every lonely night in a concrete worker's dorm, every missed birthday and Christmas I watched through a phone screen. It had all been for this one perfect surprise. I was finally going to walk through the front door of the beautiful craftsman house I had bought outright for my daughter Emily on Maple Street in Tacoma, Washington, and wrap her and my 5-year-old granddaughter Lily in my arms for the very first time in real life. That house, with its deep green siding, white trim, wide front porch swing, and the giant Douglas fir Emily used to climb when she was little, was supposed to be their safe forever home, paid for with every overtime dollar I ever earned. As the taxi pulled up in the cool November drizzle, everything looked exactly the same as the day I left. My hands shook so badly I could barely get the original brass key into the lock. Emily had no idea I was coming. I was grinning like an idiot, rehearsing the words in my head, "Surprise, baby girl, daddy's home for good." If you're watching this story, please subscribe to the channel, like button, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. But the second that key turned and the door creaked open, every ounce of happiness in my body turned to solid ice. A man's voice, cold, vicious, and full of pure hatred, sliced through the quiet house like a razor blade. "Clean that disgusting mess up faster, or you'll get another beating tonight, you worthless piece of trash." My blood froze in my veins. I stepped silently into the hallway, my work boots not making a single sound on the hardwood floors I had paid to have refinished, and peered around the corner into the living room. There, on her hands and knees like a slave in her own home, was my little girl, my Emily, the child I had carried on my shoulders to every county fair and zoo trip, scrubbing vomit and broken glass off the floor with raw, trembling fingers. She was wearing a filthy, oversized apron with huge blood-red embroidered letters across the chest that read, "Whitaker Family Property." My daughter, my flesh and blood, the girl who once dreamed of saving animals and changing the world, labeled like cattle in the house her own father had given her. Something deep inside me, something ancient and unstoppable, snapped wide awake. My name is Theron James Caldwell, and this is the true, raw, unfiltered story of how I came home from the desert and discovered that my only child had been living as a prisoner, a servant, a piece of property in her own house for 4 soul-destroying years. 12 years building the tallest skyscrapers and deepest oil rigs in the Middle East had been worth every sacrifice, every blister, every tear I hid from my coworkers. Or so I thought. I had saved nearly $1 million, sent money home every single month without fail, called Emily and Lily every single night no matter how exhausted I was. I had watched Lily take her first steps on a grainy video call at 3 a.m. My time sung her lullabies from the other side of the planet, mailed her toys and clothes and books for every birthday I missed. I told myself it was temporary. Just a few more years and I'd come home a hero with enough money to give them the world. Instead, I walked straight into hell on earth. The monster who had just threatened my daughter suddenly noticed me standing there in the doorway. In the blink of an eye, his entire face transformed from pure cruelty to a wide, fake, rehearsed smile as he strode toward me with arms flung open. "Dad, oh my God! Welcome home, what an unbelievable surprise," Mason Whitaker exclaimed, his voice dripping with syrupy warmth that made my skin crawl. Emily was just helping clean up a little spill. You know how she loves keeping everything perfect around here. Emily shot to her feet so fast she nearly slipped in the mess she was scrubbing, ripping the degrading apron over her head and frantically stuffing it behind a couch cushion, her eyes wide with absolute terror. She looked like a trapped animal praying I wouldn't say the wrong thing and make everything worse. "Dad, she managed to choke out, forcing a smile that never, ever reached her haunted eyes. You're really here. I can't believe it. Then a tiny face peeked out from behind Emily's legs. My granddaughter Lily, 5 years old going on 6, with the exact same big blue eyes and dimples her mother had at that age. She stared up at me, clutching Emily's jeans with both tiny hands, pure fear written all over her beautiful little face. "Mommy," she whispered, voice trembling. "Who is that scary man?" Those 8 words hit me harder than any physical blow I had ever taken on any construction site in my life. I had sung this child to sleep across oceans, read her goodnight moon and the very hungry caterpillar at 4 a.m. My time more nights than I could count. Sent her stuffed animals and princess dresses and books for every holiday I missed. But in person, I was nothing but a frightening stranger. I dropped slowly to one knee, fighting the tears that were burning in my throat, and made my voice as soft and gentle as I possibly could. "Hey there, sweet angel. I'm your Grandpa Theron. Remember our video calls? Remember how I used to make silly monkey faces and sing wheels on the bus? I've been working very, very far away. But now I'm home, and I brought you the biggest hug in the whole world. And I'm never leaving again." Lily immediately buried her face in Emily's leg and started to cry. Emily rested a shaking hand on Lily's head. And that's when I saw them. Dark purple fingerprints wrapped completely around her delicate wrist, like a bracelet of pure evil. Grip marks so deep they looked almost black in the afternoon light. There were older yellow bruises fading underneath the new ones. A fresh split in her lower lip she was trying to hide by biting it, and when she reached up to wipe a tear, I saw cigarette burn-sized circles on her forearm. She quickly covered again. "Emily," I started, my voice cracking like thunder in the distance. But she yanked her sleeve down and shot me a look of pure desperation that screamed, "Please, God. Not now. Not in front of him." Mason clapped my shoulder hard enough to leave a bruise of his own, his eyes flashing a warning sharp enough to cut glass. "She's been so clumsy lately." He laughed, the sound cold and empty and utterly fake, always walking into doors, dropping things. You know how women are, always bumping into things. In that single horrifying moment, standing in the house I had built my entire life around, I understood with crystal clear certainty that my daughter had been living in daily terror, and my granddaughter had never known what it felt like to be safe. One thought burned through my brain like a branding iron. I was going to find out exactly what these monsters had done to my family. And then I was going to make them pay with everything they had and more. 3 hours later, Mason announced he had a client dinner downtown and left in his gleaming black Mercedes, reeking of whiskey, expensive cologne, and arrogance. The second his car disappeared down Maple Street, the entire atmosphere in the house changed completely. It was like a dark, suffocating cloud lifted for the first time in years. Lily was napping upstairs, completely exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of meeting me. Emily and I were finally alone in the kitchen that used to be filled with her laughter when she was a teenager baking cookies at midnight. She sat down at the oak table I had bought her as a housewarming gift 8 years ago, staring at her bruised, work-rough hands in the golden afternoon light streaming through the window. The bruises weren't just on her wrists anymore. There were fingerprints on her upper arms, a boot print-shaped mark on her shin, burn scars from hot pans, and when she reached for a glass of water, I saw the faint white lines of old cuts on her knuckles. It took every single ounce of self-control I had not to put my fist through the wall right then and there. "Emily Grace Caldwell," I said as gently as I possibly could, sitting across from her and taking both of her cold, trembling hands in mine. "Look at me, baby. Tell me the truth about those bruises, and do not, under any circumstances, Tell me you walked into a door or dropped something on yourself. I raised you. I know every single expression on your face. I know when you're lying to protect someone." She flinched so hard she nearly fell out of the chair, pulling her hands away and wrapping her arms around herself like a shield against the world. "It's nothing, Dad. Really, just accidents from doing housework and helping with renovations around the house and yard work and things like that." Her voice was barely above a whisper, and she wouldn't meet my eyes for even a second. This wasn't my daughter. This was a hollow, terrified shell wearing her skin. I gently took her chin and turned her face toward mine, forcing her to look at me for the first time since I walked in. "Emily, listen to me very carefully. Remember the promise I made the day you were born, when the nurse placed you in my arms and I looked into your tiny face and swore to God above that nothing and no one would ever hurt you as long as there was breath in my body. That promise did not come with an expiration date. It is still in full effect today, tomorrow, and every day for the rest of my life, no matter how old you are." That was all it took. Her beautiful face crumpled like paper in fire, and the tears came in a flood as she collapsed forward into my arms, sobbing with the kind of deep, body-shaking cries that only come from years and years of bottled-up pain and terror. "Oh, Daddy," she wailed, using the name she hadn't called me since she was 8 years old and scared of thunderstorms. "I ruined everything. I messed up so badly. And now Lily is growing up in this nightmare. And I can't protect her. And it's all my fault. I'm so sorry." The story that poured out of her over the next 2 hours shattered my heart into a million jagged pieces that I knew would never fit back together the same way. After Lily was born, Emily had fallen into the darkest, most terrifying pit of postpartum depression and psychosis imaginable. There were days she couldn't get out of bed, days she couldn't feed herself, days she couldn't even hold her own baby without dropping her because her arms were shaking so violently. She was having suicidal thoughts so severe that her doctor had her on suicide watch and talked about involuntary hospitalization. Mason's family, the wealthy, powerful, untouchable Whitakers of Medina, swooped in like knights in shining armor. They paid for everything: private psychiatrists, in-home nurses, experimental treatments, the absolute best care money could buy in the entire Pacific Northwest. They moved into the house I had bought, temporarily, to help take care of Lily while Emily recovered. Or so they said. Emily was so heavily medicated that most days she didn't know what day it was, what year it was, or even who she was half the time. And during that chemical fog, when her mind was completely shattered, they kept bringing her papers to sign, insurance forms, they said, medical authorizations, temporary power of attorney so they could handle bills and make decisions for Lily. Just until she felt better. Just temporary. Just to help. She signed whatever they put in front of her because she trusted them, because she was desperate to get well for her baby, because she literally couldn't think straight enough to read a full sentence. By the time the medication fog finally started to lift 6 months later, it was too late. The house had been transferred into Benjamin Whitaker's name, Mason's father. All of her bank accounts had been drained or frozen. Every asset she owned was gone. And the Whitakers sat her down one afternoon and explained, with cold, satisfied smiles, that she now owed them for 4 years of housing, food, childcare, medical care, and emotional support. The debt was impossible to ever repay. She was their live-in maid, cook, nanny, laundress, and punching bag. If she ever tried to leave, or even spoke out of turn, they would have her declared an unfit mother and take Lily away forever. They made her wear that apron every single day as a daily reminder that she was no longer Emily Caldwell, beloved daughter and mother, She was Whitaker family property. She got up from the table, walked to a locked drawer in the kitchen I had never seen before, and pulled out a thick manila folder stuffed to bursting with papers. I kept everything. "Dad," she whispered, voice breaking all over again. Every medical record, every threatening text message, every single document they made me sign when I couldn't even hold a pen straight. I always hoped, someday, someone would come and save us. I opened that folder and felt a rage so pure, so holy, it was almost cleansing. They had preyed on my daughter when she was at her absolute weakest, when her mind was poisoned and her body was broken. They had stolen her home, her dignity, her child's childhood, her future, everything that made her who she was. As I looked at those papers, one single thought echoed through every cell in my body like a war drum. The Whitaker family had just signed their own death warrants. They had forgotten one crucial, fatal detail. Emily wasn't alone anymore. Her father was home, and hell itself was coming with me. That night, after I tucked Lily into bed and read her 4 stories until she finally fell asleep, clutching the stuffed giraffe I had carried all the way from Dubai, I spread every single document across the kitchen table like a general preparing for the bloodiest battle of his life. The dates told a story of calculated, evil exploitation that made my skin crawl and my blood boil. Emily had signed the final property transfer deed on July 19th, the exact same day her psychiatrist had increased her medication to the absolute maximum dosage because she had attempted suicide 2 nights earlier and was considered an immediate danger to herself. The next morning, while Emily sat crying at the table, barely able to hold a glass of water, I drove straight to Harborview Medical Center in Seattle, the hospital where Emily had received most of her treatment. I demanded to speak to Dr. Laura Henderson, the psychiatrist who had literally saved my daughter's life more than once. After I explained the situation through a wall of barely contained rage and tears, Dr. Henderson pulled Emily's massive medical file and agreed to meet me immediately in her office, closing the door behind us. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, her face growing darker and more horrified with every page she turned. "Your daughter suffered one of the most severe, life-threatening cases of postpartum depression and psychosis I have ever treated in my 28-year career. And I have treated hundreds. During the entire month of July, Emily was on such dangerously high doses of lorazepam, sertraline, quetiapine, and other heavy sedatives that she was essentially in a medically induced coma while technically awake. We had to monitor her 24/7 because she was at constant risk of accidental overdose from cognitive impairment alone." Dr. Henderson continued flipping through pages, shaking her head in disbelief and growing fury that matched my own. "Look at these nurse's notes from July 18th. Patient unable to recognize own mother when she visited. Unable to feed self. Unable to answer basic orientation questions. July 19th. Patient required 2 nurses to physically guide her hand to sign the visitor log. Handwriting completely illegible. Patient asked what year it was and began crying when told 2021. July 20th. Patient stared at wall for 6 hours straight, unresponsive to verbal stimuli. I asked the question I already knew the answer to, my voice barely above a whisper because I was afraid I would start screaming and never stop. "Doctor, are you telling me that on the day my daughter signed away her house, she was in no mental state to even know her own name or what planet she was on?" Dr. Henderson looked me dead in the eye, tears of rage in her own eyes now. "Mr. Caldwell, your daughter was in no condition to decide whether to wear socks that week, let alone transfer ownership of a $450,000 home to people who were supposed to be helping her. Any contract, any document, any signature from that period is legally worthless on its face. What those people did wasn't just cruel or immoral. It was textbook fraud, coercion, undue influence, exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and quite possibly human trafficking. I will testify to this in any court, under oath, for as long as it takes, and I will bring every nurse, social worker, and resident who cared for her to do the same. She printed out a 15-page medical summary, signed it, dated it, had it notarized on the spot by her assistant, and handed it to me like a loaded weapon. Take this, Theron, and give them absolute, unrelenting hell. Walking out of Harborview clutching that ironclad, court-ready proof in my hands, I felt something I hadn't felt since the moment I opened that front door. Hope, real, burning, righteous hope. The Whitakers thought their money, their connections, their old family name made them gods in the state of Washington. They were about to learn what happens when you try to destroy a man's child, and he has nothing left to lose but everything to fight for. I spent the rest of the day and half the night researching attorneys who specialized in vulnerable adult exploitation, elder abuse, even though Emily was only 32. The laws were the same, and human trafficking cases. One name kept rising to the top like a beacon: Jennifer Dawson of Dawson and Partners, downtown Seattle. Jennifer had spent 25 years destroying wealthy predators exactly like the Whitakers, taking down old money families who thought they were untouchable. Her office sat on the 23rd floor of a glass tower with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Puget Sound, Mount Rainier, and the snow-capped Olympic Mountains. When I walked in unannounced the next morning, carrying that folder like it was made of dynamite, Jennifer took one look at my face and cleared her entire schedule for the day. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, motioning me to a leather chair across from her massive desk. "Sit down and tell me everything. Do not leave out a single detail, no matter how small, how ugly, or how painful." I told her all of it. The degrading apron, the daily beatings, the 4 years of forced labor, the threats to take Lily away forever, the signatures obtained while Emily was in a drug-induced fog so deep she couldn't recognize her own mother. I slid Dr. Henderson's 15-page medical summary across the desk like I was passing her the keys to the kingdom. Jennifer read every single page in complete silence, her eyes growing harder, colder, and more dangerous with each line. When she finally closed the folder, she looked up at me with a smile that would make a great white shark nervous. "Theron," she said, voice low and deadly calm. "This isn't just a good case. This is the kind of case attorneys dream about their entire careers and never see once. What the Whitaker family did isn't merely fraud or exploitation. It's human trafficking, false imprisonment, criminal coercion, undue influence, felony assault, and about 20 other state and federal crimes that will put every single one of them in federal prison for decades." She spread the documents out across her desk like a general laying out battle plans for the war to end all wars. "We're not just getting your daughter's house back. We're going to take every dime they have, destroy their reputation so completely their name will be poison for 100 years, send them all to federal prison, and make sure they never hurt another human being as long as they live." She laid out the strategy step by step, clear, precise, and merciless. Phase 1, we give them exactly 48 hours to voluntarily return the property at 1427 Maple Street and pay $3 million in compensatory and punitive damages for 4 years of forced labor, emotional distress, physical assault, and pain and suffering. Some families fold the second they realize the game is over. Phase 2 if they refuse. And Jennifer was 100% certain they would. We file simultaneous civil and criminal complaints. Civil to void every fraudulent contract and recover massive damages. Criminal referral directly to the FBI's human trafficking and public corruption units. plus the Washington State Attorney General. Phase 3, we go full public. The Seattle Times. King 5 Como. Every major news outlet from Seattle to New York would be handed this story on a silver platter with a big red bow. Prominent Medina dynasty enslaves mentally ill, Tacoma mother for 4 years, steals her home, brands her like cattle. Phase 4, we destroy them completely through asset forfeiture, lifelong restraining orders, and civil judgments so large their grandchildren will still be paying them off in 2100. Jennifer stood up, walked around the desk, and extended her hand. I've been waiting my entire career for a case this airtight. Mr. Caldwell. The Whitaker family just picked a fight with the wrong father, on the wrong day, in the wrong city. Welcome to the war. I shook her hand so hard I probably left fingerprints. When do we start? I asked. She grinned like a wolf scenting blood for the first time in years. Tomorrow morning, bright and early. You and I are paying a personal visit to the Whitaker estate in Medina. We're going to give them one, and only one, chance to surrender peacefully. If they're smart, they'll take it. If they're not, well, may God have mercy on their souls, because we sure as hell won't. Walking out of that office into the cold Seattle rain, I felt taller, stronger, and more alive than I had in 12 long years. The Whitakers had ruled Washington state like feudal lords for 4 generations. They owned politicians, judges, police chiefs, newspapers, entire charitable foundations. But they were about to learn a very old, very painful lesson. There is no power on earth stronger than a father whose child has been harmed. And I was about to become the reckoning they never saw coming. The next morning, Jennifer and I drove through the massive wrought iron gates of the Whitaker estate in Medina, the most exclusive and expensive zip code in the entire state of Washington. The mansion was obscene in its grandeur, 3 stories of cold, gray stone, towering marble columns that screamed old money, manicured gardens that probably cost more to maintain each month than most families made in a year, and a circular driveway with a fountain in the center that could have paid for a small house, a butler in an actual tuxedo, complete with white gloves, opened the door and led us through hallways lined with oil paintings of Whitaker ancestors, who all looked exactly as arrogant, cruel, and untouchable as the current generation. Benjamin Whitaker, Mason's 73-year-old father, sat behind a desk the size of a small car in a mahogany-paneled study that smelled of cigar smoke and inherited privilege. He didn't stand when we entered. He didn't even bother to look up from the financial papers he was pretending to read. Mr. Caldwell, he finally drawled, voice dripping with aristocratic contempt that could have frozen water. I understand you have some concerns about your daughter's domestic arrangements with our family. Rest assured, Emily is perfectly content as a valued member of our household staff, and we have provided her with room, board, and care far beyond what she could ever afford on her own. I felt every muscle in my body coil like a spring ready to snap. Household staff, I repeated, my voice low enough to rattle the crystal decanters on the sideboard. You mean the slave you turned my daughter into in the house I bought with 12 years of blood and sweat in the desert? Benjamin finally looked up. And for the first time, he let the mask slip just enough to show the cold, calculating predator underneath. He chuckled, a sound like ice cracking over a frozen lake. Careful, old man. My family has owned this state since before your kind even arrived here. We own the judges, the governors, the police commissioners, the newspapers. You are less than nothing. You have no power here. Jennifer stepped forward calmly, placing the thick folder on his desk with a soft, deliberate thud that sounded exactly like a gavel falling in a courtroom. Mr. Whitaker, my name is Jennifer Dawson of Dawson and Partners. Contained within this folder are your daughter-in-law's complete medical records from Harborview Medical Center, along with sworn affidavits from her treating psychiatrist, 3 registered nurses, and 2 psychiatric social workers who cared for her during the period in question. She opened the folder with the slow precision of a surgeon, turning pages so he could see the damning evidence in full color. On July 19th, Emily Caldwell signed away ownership of her Tacoma home while so heavily medicated for severe postpartum psychosis that she could not recognize her own mother when she visited, could not feed herself, required 2 nurses to physically guide her hand to sign the visitor log, and asked multiple staff members what year it was before bursting into tears. Benjamin's smirk faltered for the first time. Just a flicker, but I saw it. You then held her against her will for 4 full years, Jennifer continued, her voice like tempered steel wrapped in silk. Forced her to perform unpaid labor under daily threat of having her child removed. Physically assaulted her repeatedly, and branded her with an apron declaring her your literal property. That is not valued household staff. Mr. Whitaker, that is human trafficking, false imprisonment, felony fraud, undue influence, exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and about 20 other state and federal crimes that carry mandatory minimum sentences in federal prison. I leaned in until I was close enough to see the sweat starting to bead on his perfectly tanned forehead. You made my little girl live in terror every single day. You let your son beat her like a dog. You stole my granddaughter's childhood and turned her into a frightened shadow. And you did it all thinking no one would ever come for you. For the first time, Benjamin actually looked at the documents. His manicured hands began to shake as he read Dr. Henderson's 15-page statement declaring Emily completely and utterly incompetent during the entire signing period. This is preposterous, he blustered, but his voice cracked like thin ice under too much weight. She signed willingly. We have witnesses, multiple witnesses. Jennifer smiled the coldest, most predatory smile I have ever seen on a human being. Please, Mr. Whitaker, call your witnesses. The FBI's Human Trafficking Division will be absolutely delighted to speak with each and every one of them under oath. Mason burst into the room at that exact moment. Face purple with rage, eyes wild like a cornered animal. Dad, why are we even talking to these people? Let me handle this, the way we handle everything. Jennifer never flinched, never even blinked. Mr. Whitaker, you have exactly 48 hours to return full, unencumbered ownership of 1427 Maple Street in Tacoma to Emily Grace Caldwell, along with $3 million in compensatory and punitive damages for 4 years of forced labor, emotional distress, physical assault, pain and suffering, and the intentional infliction of terror on a mother and her child. If you refuse, we file everything simultaneously civil suit in King County Superior Court to void every fraudulent contract, criminal referral to the FBI and the Washington State Attorney General, and a full press packet to every major news outlet from Seattle to New York City. Benjamin stood slowly, his hands trembling so badly his solid gold watch rattled against the desk. You just declared war on the wrong family. Caldwell, we will bury you, your daughter, and that bastard grandchild so deep no one will ever find the bodies. I stepped forward until we were nose to nose, close enough to smell the fear underneath his $1,000 cologne. You already tried to bury my family, Benjamin, but you forgot one very important thing. You left me alive to dig them up and bring the whole goddamn mountain down on your heads. As we walked out, Jennifer squeezed my arm hard enough to leave bruises. Perfect, she whispered with pure satisfaction. They just threatened us in front of 4 household staff witnesses, 2 security cameras, and a butler who's probably already updating his resume. That's felony witness intimidation, terroristic threats, and conspiracy to commit violence, all on record. This just became the easiest case of my entire life. 47 hours later, the Whitakers still hadn't responded. Their silence was all the answer we needed. The next morning, the Seattle Times front-page headline screamed across the entire Pacific Northwest in massive bold letters, "Medina millionaire dynasty accused of enslaving mentally ill Tacoma mother for 4 years, stealing her home, branding her family property like cattle." The investigative report was 14 pages long, complete with photographs of the degrading apron, redacted medical records proving Emily's total incapacity, side-by-side images of our modest Tacoma craftsman next to the Whitaker Palace, and anonymous interviews with former household staff who said they always wondered why Emily never left the house anymore, and why she flinched every time Mason raised his voice. Within hours, #Justice for Emily was the #1 trending topic in the entire United States. Complete strangers shared their own stories of abuse, exploitation, and survival. Local news helicopters circled both houses like vultures. A GoFundMe titled "Help Emily and Lily Rebuild Their Lives After 4 Years of Hell" raised $800,000 in the first 12 hours alone. At 2:17 p.m. that afternoon, Jennifer called me screaming with pure, unfiltered joy, "Theron, get your ass to the King County Courthouse right now. Judge Margaret Chen just signed the emergency ex parte injunction. Emily gets her house back today, immediately. No hearing required. Effective this instant in the packed courtroom." Judge Chen, a no-nonsense veteran of 30 years on the bench with a reputation for having zero tolerance for rich predators, read her ruling with a voice that rang like a church bell of justice, based on overwhelming, indisputable, and frankly horrifying medical evidence presented by counsel. It is clear beyond any possible doubt that Emily Caldwell Whitaker utterly lacked the mental capacity to execute any legal document during the period in question. The property transfer is hereby declared null, void, fraudulent, and criminal ab initio. Ownership of 1427 Maple Street reverts to Miss Emily Grace Caldwell, effective this moment. Furthermore, a permanent restraining order is granted against Benjamin Whitaker, Mason Whitaker, and every member of the Whitaker family or their agents. Any contact, any approach, any communication whatsoever will result in immediate arrest and felony charges. Mason had to be physically tackled and handcuffed by 3 bailiffs as he screamed death threats at the judge, at Jennifer, at me, at anyone within earshot. Benjamin sat frozen in his $10,000 suit, face ash gray, as their fleet of $1,000-an-hour attorneys scrambled like rats abandoning a sinking ship. 2 hours later, I stood on the front porch of our house, watching a convoy of Seattle police officers escort Emily and Lily up the front walk like returning heroes. Emily carried one small, battered suitcase, literally everything the Whitakers had allowed her to keep in 4 years of captivity. Lily clutched her worn stuffed rabbit and looked around in wide-eyed wonder that was finally free of fear. "Mommy," she whispered, voice full of pure hope for the first time in her life. "Are we really truly allowed to live here now, forever and ever?" Emily dropped to her knees right there on the porch, pulled Lily into her arms, and sobbed tears of joy and relief so hard her whole body shook. "Yes, baby, this is our home. We're free. We're finally free." That night, as we ate homemade lasagna brought by a neighbor who cried when she hugged Emily for the first time in years, Mason drunk-dialed the house phone 9 separate times. Jennifer had told me to record everything with a court-approved device. His slurred, raging voice filled the kitchen like poison. "This isn't over. Old man, you think you've won, we will burn you all to the ground. You, your worthless daughter, that little brat. Every single thing you love. Enjoy your pathetic little victory while it lasts. Because it won't." Click. Another 4 felony threats on tape, each one worse than the last. For 14 glorious heavenly days, we lived in pure bliss for the first time in over a decade. Lily learned to ride her new big girl bicycle up and down the driveway, shouting, "Watch me, Grandpa. Look how fast I can go every 5 seconds," with the biggest smile I had ever seen. Emily's bruises faded day by day, and the light, the real, beautiful light, came back into her eyes like the sun rising after the longest night. We painted Lily's room sunshine yellow with hand-painted clouds on the ceiling, planted an entire flower garden along the fence with roses and lavender and sunflowers, had real family dinners filled with laughter and stories and inside jokes instead of fear and silence. We bought a full backyard playground, set with swings and a slide and a little treehouse just for Lily. Every single evening, I pushed my granddaughter on the swings while Emily watched from the porch with a radiant, peaceful smile that finally, after all the pain, reached all the way to her soul. But Mason never stopped calling. The threats grew darker, more unhinged, more desperate with every passing day. "Some fires start slow," he whispered one night in a voice that sent ice through my veins. "You'll never see it coming. You'll wake up choking on smoke and watch everything you love turn to ash while you burn with it." 2 weeks later, a violent Pacific Northwest storm rolled in from the ocean like the wrath of God himself. Thunder shaking the house like artillery shells, lightning turning night into blinding day, wind screaming like the damned. I was lying awake listening to the storm rage when I heard footsteps on the front porch. Slow, deliberate, and completely wrong. Then the unmistakable, stomach-turning smell of gasoline began seeping through the walls like death itself. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911, and whispered to the dispatcher with deadly calm, "There's a man pouring gasoline all around my house at 1427 Maple Street in Tacoma. He's trying to murder my family while we sleep." Flames whooshed to life outside the windows, orange and hungry and roaring, racing up the siding like demons released from hell. Mason's voice rose above the storm, completely insane with rage and defeat. "You destroyed my family. You took everything from me. Now I'll take everything from you. Burn, burn it all to the ground. Let it burn." I burst into Emily's room and shook her awake with urgent hands. "Fire, we have to go now." She grabbed Lily, and we ran through choking black smoke that burned our lungs and blinded our eyes with tears. The front door was already an inferno, a solid wall of flame. We headed for the backsliding door, but Mason was already there, silhouetted by the fire like a demon straight out of nightmares, swinging a crowbar and screaming, "Nobody leaves. If I can't have my family, nobody gets to have theirs." He smashed the glass door into 1,000 pieces and lunged at us with murder in his eyes. I shoved Emily and Lily behind me with every ounce of strength I had and tackled him like a linebacker, crashing us both into the kitchen cabinets hard enough to split wood. We fought like animals, fists and elbows and knees, blood in my mouth, smoke filling my lungs, flames devouring the walls around us. Sirens wailed closer, growing louder, red and blue lights flashing through the smoke. I managed to pin him long enough for firefighters to burst through the front in full gear, hoses blasting water that hissed and steamed against the inferno, and police to drag us all out into the pouring rain. 6 months later, I sat in the King County Courthouse and watched the final chapter of pure justice unfold before my eyes. Mason Whitaker, in an orange jumpsuit and shackles that clanked with every movement, showed no emotion as Judge Margaret Chen sentenced him to 25 years in federal prison without parole for attempted murder in the first degree arson, human trafficking, stalking, multiple counts of felony assault, and a dozen other charges that would keep him locked away until he was an old man. Benjamin Whitaker, frail and broken and stripped of every illusion of power, received 18 years for masterminding the entire criminal enterprise from the very beginning. Their empire collapsed, overnight, assets frozen by federal order, properties seized at public auction, their name toxic waste from Seattle to Spokane and beyond. The court ordered $6 million in restitution, enough to completely demolish what was left of the fire-damaged house and build a brand new, bigger, brighter dream home with every safety feature imaginable. A gourmet kitchen for Emily, a library full of books for Lily, a ground-floor master suite for Grandpa, and a backyard playground that would make any child jealous. Emily is now in school full-time, studying to become a social worker so she can help other women escape the hell she survived and find their way back to the light. Lily, now 6 years old and growing like a beautiful weed, calls me Grandpa every single day without hesitation, insists I read her the same story about the brave little mouse every single night, and falls asleep on my chest during movie nights with popcorn and blankets, and every single evening at sunset. I push my granddaughter on the swing in our new backyard while my daughter watches from the porch with a radiant, peaceful, unbreakable smile that finally, after all the pain and all the years, reaches all the way to her soul and beyond. Looking back now, I see how dangerously close I came to losing everything that actually matters in this life because I was chasing money on the other side of the world while my family suffered in silence. Don't make my mistake. No job, no salary. No amount of money in the world is worth missing your child's pain or your grandchild's childhood. God brought me home at the exact second my family needed me most. What looked like coincidence was divine timing, perfect and undeniable. The Whitaker family thought they could destroy a vulnerable woman and face no consequences whatsoever. They were wrong, dead wrong, and they paid the ultimate price. This is the true story of a father's love that crossed oceans and moved mountains, of a grandfather who came home just in time to save his girls, and of the unbreakable bond of family that no amount of money, power, or evil can ever destroy. If this story touched your heart even a little, share it with someone who needs to remember that justice and love always, always win in the end. And if you're a parent or grandparent working far away from the people who call you daddy or grandpa with their whole heart, please come home. Come home today before it's too late, because no success in the world is worth the price of missing the moments that truly matter. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments.